Yo, what is up, guys? Snap here. Today we're going to be talking about all of the party build updates here at 3K Corruption and Last Epoch. So Friday night, we hit 3,000 Corruption. I took a break Saturday. I'm going to be recording this video here on Sunday. I'm going to try and go over basically a complete overview in depth of all of the builds, everything they're doing top down. Because honestly, I think about 3K Corruption here, this is probably going to be our stopping point, and there's a few reasons for that. I do feel like the current setup and all of our builds in its current state can go well above 10,000 corruption. It has the damage for it as well as the tankiness, and we also do not have any threats on bosses. So I do believe if we were just continuing to grind, we would be able to get easily above 10,000 corruption or even more. But I am not playing that much, so if somebody wants to, go higher and pass me, then more power to them, right? But I do believe that the builds have the current strength to go well over 10K if you were to continue playing. It is, however, a substantial time investment to raise your corruption this high, and it's just something we're not interested in doing. Anyways, let's move on to all of the characters here. First up is obviously going to be the main carry, which is me. I'm playing the Runemaster here. Here's a snapshot of my character in all of its current gear. Some of the highlight items here is just going to be my 4 LP Railwinds. It has a almost perfectly divined cast speed multi lightning pen. I do think that the 4th suffix here is going to be kind of useless, and so I would rather have a guaranteed slam onto 3 perfectly divined other affixes and just put a garbage 4th mod on here, which just happened to roll health on kill. Moving on, the bar boot here is going to be best in slot. You can put intelligence on here. You can put dex on here. Armor suffixes, dodge suffixes, they're all good here. Also, the explicit rolls, the dex int is also super good to get high here. You can get +6 intelligence and int just for having a really well-rolled explicit. So I would try and get like a really high roll 1 LP or even 2 LP rather than having a really bad roll 2 LP or 3 LP, right? So the roll matters here a lot to get some more dex and int. If you're unfamiliar with the build, I would try and go back a few videos. I try and explain the Railwinds build a lot more in depth, but essentially we're scaling dodge, armor, and ward, and the lowest of those 3 gives us added spell damage. Additionally, we get dex scaling with the chest, and so scaling dex gives us dodge. It also gives us more damage. It's a very powerful stat on this build, defensively and offensively. Moving on the amulet here, I managed to snag a double dodge base here that was on a less damage over time taken base, which is the Oracle implicit. I sealed mana regen and just crafted spell damage on it. You could also craft multi. It depends on how much increased damage you have from other sources, but they're both good options here. I really value the less damage taken over time stat, especially as you go deeper corruption. The damage over time really starts to be the thing that kills you. And so getting a Oracle base here, or even a Confluence of Fate, which is unique, is a super good option here to get on the amulet slot. You can look for any combo of double exalted multi, dodge rating, and then AoE is also kind of nice for arenas if you're trying to do that, because you can quickly spec into Antipoda Mesembria and clear arenas, and so a little bit of AoE can go a long way there. Red rings are super good for the build, mainly because, of course, +5 all attributes gives us armor from strength. It gives us dex, which gives us more damage, which gives us more dodge, which gives us more spell damage. It helps cap out our resistances super easily, and then also it gives us 18% increased dodge rating. Dodge rating is super good on the build. Red rings are pretty much mandatory to get the Railwinds going, I believe. It's not completely necessary to get them with LP, of course, but I think to get this staff build going, you're definitely going to want red rings because of how good they are at giving you extra armor and dodge. It caps your res. It's super bis on this build. Other red ring is also just intelligence here. It has 15 int instead of 16. Very unlucky. I couldn't get a ring base that had 4 good mods on it that was also perfectly divined to 16 intelligence, so this is just kind of what I ended up with. But hey, I mean, I hit the T7, not sad about that. Jungle Queen's belt here, it's just double dodge suffixes and then chance to find potions on the prefix so that you can have more potions dropping so that you can proc the dodge buff more often, especially on bosses. To be honest, a lot of belt affixes are just trash. The only really appealing one that I don't have is just, of course, going to be the traversal cooldown on potion use. However, I find it unnecessary, especially in a party, because the paladins that you're playing with are going to be able to run faster than you anyways, and I think your goal as a carry in a party is to just pump out as much damage as possible, also just, have as much defenses as possible. So I think going double dodge suffixes and potion chance on the prefix is going to be probably the best way to build this. Obviously, the potion chance prefix is less important. If you just can get double dodge on a 2 LP Jungle Queens, it's very obtainable. As for the gloves here, I think it's very important to get Eternal Gauntlets with a high armor mitigation applies to damage over time. You have a few choices for the Exalted mod that you're going for. Dodge rating is viable, armor is viable, hybrid armor and crit damage or reduced crit damage is viable. Dexterity is viable, intelligence is viable. All of those are, of course, very good stats to get on this build. And then once you get one of those bases, you can insight craft on the current health loss per second mod to enable healing hands, and then Rune of Discovery it off to get a guaranteed seal. I'm not going to go into the specifics of how exactly to do insight crafting. If you're unfamiliar, Tunk Labs has a calculator, which I'm also going to link in the description, so you can try and make a pair of gloves like this. There's also a pretty good video by Perry the Pig that kind of explains the basics of insight crafting, and you can go there if you're looking to learn more about how to craft something like this. And then also it does feel nice to have a lower teleport cooldown so that you can have a higher uptime on the armor buff that it provides to you. And then of course, Snowdrift just provides you a massive increased dodge rating on the implicit and the explicit. So it's just a very, very nice pair of boots overall for the build. Last but not least is the Twisted Heart here. I am mainly equipping Twisted Heart for the increased strength, cast speed, and the level of elemental spells. Current dynamic in a party is that you actually do not care at all about the health conversion to ward, but I do think it is definitely worth equipping just because of the extra armor you get and the cast speed and the level of elemental skills. If you were solo, I would care a lot more about the health conversion, and I also would try to build a little bit more health on stuff like idols, because this is honestly going to be kind of your main ward generator as a self-casting Plasma Orb Runemaster. So definitely try and look for a high roll if you're trying to play this build solo. As for the idols here, I have replaced my stun immunity with AoE for elemental area skills because I am planning on doing an arena run, and the primary skill I'm going to be using for those is going to be Antipode, which scales with AoE. Then I obviously put armor and mana here as the suffixes because there's really nothing better. If you want, you can use the 4x1 tall idols and continue to get stun immunity on teleport. That's better for monolith clearing. I'm just going for a unique setup for arena pushing here. The blessings, of course, here haven't changed. It's just gold drop rate, I think, if you're in trade league, crit multi, shred lightning, resistances, and then armor. You can mess with these blessings a little bit down here. You can try and get percent dodge on this blessing. You know, it depends on really what you have on all your other gear, but your main goal, of course, is to try and just match your dodge and armor values down here. As for the skills, there's two important things that Frostwall does, and it's an Aspirant's Arrival. When you cast the Frostwall, it gives you a massive damage steroid for your next runic invocation, so making sure to weave in Frostwalls into your cast here is going to be super important. And then also, it's 14% more damage for chilled enemies while you have a Frostwall up, and that's basically all that this skill is doing. It's just a damage steroid. It also is a pretty nice source of Frenzy and Haste. All the other nodes are just kind of filler. You can kind of just take whatever. This node makes it cost a little bit less mana. It just helps with the mana management overall. Flameboard is just crazy skill, of course. I think I prefer the double charge in this current state of it. You can just grab double charge, and then obviously you get the less damage taken nodes over here, less elemental damage taken nodes over here. You can also get it to last longer, and then you can get some ward retention. I think those are the best bang for your buck, is this tree right here. The runic invocation tree here, obviously you want as much base crit as you need to get crit capped. These nodes up here are probably going to be your best damage. I have a little bit low rolls on the staff and the chest, so I don't have quite all the levels I need. I did cut some of this damage over here for some AoE, and as I said before, I'm going to be planning on doing an arena run to see how far we can go with Antipode of Mesembria, so I expect the AoE nodes because I think it's super nice quality of life for arena. Otherwise, if you're just playing Plasma Orb, just cut this AoE, put it back into, this damage node over here, these damage nodes here, and perhaps the mana refund as well. Rune Bolt tree, of course, you need to spec the cast speed here, and then Searing Dart in order to cast Plasma Orb, and then Rune Bolt is going to be your primary mana generator in the build. You get a 100% chance to get 12 mana on hit with the Rune Bolt. This is super powerful because you're casting 3 times every time for each Plasma Orb, and that's giving you 36 mana each time you do a Plasma Orb rotation. It also helps to get extra projectiles, and then also make it so those projectiles home so that you're hitting stuff more consistently. And past that, Rune Bolt is giving us these Rune Weave stacks. The Rune Weave stacks give us more generation, and then also gives us 9% base crit, which is pretty massive for the invocation. And then additionally, it's giving us 21% more damage when we're at max stacks of Rune Weave. So this Rune Bolt has all the utility. It really ties the build together, and is basically one of the best ways, I think, to play a Runemaster because of all of the utility it gives you in terms of mana, base crit, and then also more multiplier. Teleport, I'm just using it for the armor buff here, as well as I'm taking the ward retention nodes. And then you just get these nodes over here to reduce the cooldown, and that's pretty straightforward. As for the tree, of course, basically you're taking all the int, cast speed, multi, and then the ward retention. Those are kind of the important points in Mage. Sork here, you are grabbing a huge cast speed steroid here, which is giving you a ton of cast speed as well as some increased damage, which you need. This node here is giving you basically capped crit chance. It's giving you so much crit chance, like 300% plus, because you're sitting at like 100 intelligence. This node is really crazy for how much you invest in it. And then I need a source of chance to chill to try and proc the chill skill, buff on Frostwall. So this is just basically enabling the 14% more damage on Frostwall. Runemaster is pretty straightforward. You're just grabbing, cast speed here. You're grabbing some more intelligence, which is obviously super nice. You also are grabbing a bunch of cast speed with a staff. This is just more damage. This is intelligence. This is more damage. This is enabling flat damage, a little bit extra. This is crit multi, and then this is just more spell damage. It's all pretty straightforward. Anyways, that's enough yapping about the Runemaster Carry. Let us go over all of the stuff about the support Paladin here. As for gearing, I do think the best way by far to build a Paladin to be an absolute brick unit character with the most defenses is of course going to be abusing Cleaver Solution with Bastion, and then getting a Frostbite Shackles. This basically just gives you absolute king defenses, and this character can honestly just AFK on top of anything in the game. It is just absolutely wild. The main interaction here, of course, is going to be stacking a bunch of strength on Tree, as well as some other pieces of gear maybe, and then converting that all to intelligence, which is giving you a substantial boost to your ward retention. That strength is also getting used on the shield here to giving you a bunch of block chance. Overall, the defensive layers for this are really crazy. Block is a super powerful mechanic, especially if you spec into it like this on this 3LP Bastion of Honor, which is honestly crazy. We're able to obtain this in Merchant's Guild. We rolled T7 healing effectiveness because of how OP Healing Hands is, and then block effectiveness and reduced damage taken on block. So this character is built like an absolute brick. Additionally, we slammed a red ring with healing effectiveness. We want DR pushing high corruption, high arena, so damage reduction in every place possible is going to be the play here. Red rings are, of course, an obvious choice. And then we also slammed cold res, which we're happy about. We hit T5 cold res, which is giving us a little bit of extra ward retention. Not really too sad about that. As for the helmet here, we went for a level of healing hands and then the shred armor. The Paladin here, which is casting healing hands, is going to be your primary source of armor shred because we did not build it onto the carry. And so because you're not hitting very much with the healing hands, you need to build a little bit of armor shred effect to try and hit the point of diminishing returns on shred. So it's very important to try and get this exalted mod on your helmet. Once you get the exalted armor shred, you can try and craft some other stuff onto it, armor, cold res to get some retention, and then you can craft level 5 T5 for +2 to levels of healing hands. Is definitely what you want to do here on the helmet. As for amulet, Oracle base is BIS. The less damage taken over time is one of the best stats, most important stats, because of how hard dots are to mitigate in endgame corruption. Increased healing effectiveness, exalted AoE for a little bit more coverage, cold resistance for the retention, and then also some frailty is welcome on the bosses as well. The chest piece is also an important here. The implicit here, or the base type, the champion regalia, provides 15% armor mitigation applies to dots, which is also super important. I can't stress enough how hard damage over time is to mitigate, so every slot possible where you can get this stat, you should obtain it. The chest also provides a whopping 700 armor, and while you might not be able to get T7 attunement and T6 strength on a base like this, you can try and get T7 attunement, T5 strength, craft armor, craft cold res. Should be pretty easy to get your hands on a base like this. Moving on to the belt, we have moved to an increased CDR belt here, mainly because we want CDR on Volatile Reversal. If you are unaware, Volatile Reversal stacks infinitely, and if you build CDR, it helps just basically ramping up as many more damage multipliers as you can on stuff like bosses and stationary targets. The T7 CDR on the belt here is going to go hard. Frostbite Shackles, of course, we're getting a bunch of cold res. We're getting cold res on the Holy Aura, and so this is just giving us a bunch of retention. And then, of course, we need the Drain mod or the missing health gained as ward in order to enable healing hands, so that's necessary here. Yulia's Path just has explicit healing effectiveness, which is, found nowhere else on boots, so it's probably the best thing to be putting here. And then once again, we're putting CDR for some extra volatile reversal uptime, and then cold res for extra ward retention. Last but not least is the Code of the Erased Sentinel. This also has armor mitigation applies to damage over time, which is, as I said before, one of the best defensive stats for endgame corruption pushing. And then you're trying to roll some combination of healing effectiveness and cold res or attunement, that kind of thing on these. Should be pretty straightforward. As for the idols, you just want healing effectiveness block on these 2x2s, and then you want healing effectiveness and honestly whatever suffixes you need to cap out res is res if you need it. The only blessings that truly matter for you here are going to be the crit strike avoidance here on the Grand Survival of Might, and then also you're going to want block chance, block effectiveness on this one, and then armor. These three are kind of the only ones you care about. The other ones don't do much for you. Anyways, moving on to the skill trees here. Volatile Reversal is the best skill in the entire game. Any veteran Last Epoch player will tell you this, and nobody will disagree. If you're unaware, Volatile Reversal has these nodes here. When you hit somebody with it, it's 30% increased damage taken for each Void Rift. You can get 2 Void Rifts by taking this node and then this node, so you have a Void Rift at the start and then the end. You can reduce the cooldown a fuck ton by taking this node as well as this node, and then these nodes down here, it's just more CDR. And if you're unaware, stuff on skill tree is typically affecting the base cooldown and is is not additive with cooldown on gear, it is multiplicative. And so getting CDR on the tree can be super powerful to reduce the base cooldown a ton, and then getting CDR on gear can reduce the cooldown even further in a multiplicative fashion. And if you're unaware, volatile reversal with this increased damage taken buff stacks for each time you hit the mob with a Void Rift. This stacks with yourself, it also stacks in between players. And if you play PoE, you know that an enemy damage taken plus 30% is a more multiplier that is separate from other more multipliers like crit multi. And so basically when you push volatile reversal, you're getting 60% increased damage taken. You reduce the base cooldown a ton by taking the CDR nodes, and then you get CDR on gear, and you can basically stack up to 3 instances of this buff times 2 for the Void Rift at the start and the end for basically 180% increased damage taken if you're sitting there on a boss. That is just one of the biggest multipliers that exists in the entire game right now, and volatile reversal hands down wins the best skill in last epoch. Anyways, moving on, Holy Aura, the main things we're taking here is the dodge to help out the Rayowinds here. 60 dodge and then 120 dodge when you activate Holy Aura does help a lot. We are taking the cleanse because poison is super annoying, and then also we're just taking some crit multi down here. It's probably the best nodes to be taking on Holy Aura. And then of course the elemental resistances down here gives you a little bit of retention for Frostbite Shackles. Paladin has Javelin spec, but it's actually, he's not casting it at all. He just basically doesn't need shield throw spec, but you can switch to Javelin on bosses in place of shield throw if you'd like. Just know it has the potential to brick your healing hands if you're throwing a non-instant skill. Last but not least is going to be healing hands. The really OP node here, of course, that I've said before is going to be Divine Barrier. This basically lets you convert all of your heals to ward, and you can, have 100 base heal here, increase to 240. That 240 healing gets multiplied by your healing effectiveness and converted to ward via Divine Barrier. This node is just absolutely crazy, and of course is the thing that is enabling all the crazy ward generation that you can see in 4-man parties. Last but not least, Sigils of Hope is a crazy team utility spell, of course. This gives you 20% damage per sigil, and you can get 5 sigils if you take this node and this node down here. The tree is pretty straightforward here. You do want to grab this cooldown recovery speed for movement skills. This actually affects your volatile reversal. This is super important. And then of course you want strength because the strength gets converted to int, which is giving you more ward retention. This node's in Void Knight helps you get the volatile reversal points that you need. It also gives you some void and physical res, which helps you cap out a little bit easier. The node's in Forge Guard is just a bunch of strength, which of course is armor and ward retention. And then all the stuff in Paladin is basically you're taking as much attunement and healing effectiveness as possible. It's all pretty straightforward here. Just increase healing, increase armor, and then strength is kind of what you're after here. If you look at all of the skills, you can see kind of how pressed the Paladin is here for slots on his bar. And so if you're going to be rolling a second support, I do think in the current state of the patch, it is very viable to roll a Void Knight support. And the purpose of the Void Knight support is kind of basically a Paladin, except for it does one thing extra, and that is it jams all the other utility that the Paladin could not fit on his skill bar, such as Javelin, as well as introducing Anomaly, which also brings utility to the whole party. Anyways, going over the gear here, the main hand here is just going to be a Shattered Cycle, and basically it is the only main hand that has cast speed on it, which you can craft cast speed onto, and that's basically all we're after here is just cast speed. The reason for that is because we want to have this healing hands not bug out when we use non-instant skills. And the only way you can do that is to not use the channeling node, which means you need to scale cast speed on this character. So a Shattered Cycle with cast speed is going to be the thing you're after here. A Peak of the Mountain here helps hit the attribute requirements necessary for hitting the red ring DR. So that is why we've gotten this here. They're also quite cheap to get them with 3, even 4 LP for some reason on trade. They're only like 5, maybe 10 mil max to get a 4 LP. So this is definitely very obtainable. You do want, and this is very important, to get a +4 levels of Anomaly. This allows you to perma stun lock bosses, and that is a very high priority on the helmet here. And then of course you're looking for attunement and then cold res, which is giving us extra retention. The amulet here, Devotion, just has increased healing effectiveness on it, which is the stat we're after, of course. And then we're going to be slamming increased healing effectiveness and cold res for the retention, which is all this character really cares about. Additionally, it is wearing a Bastion with healing effectiveness. This build does get a fair amount of strength, +50, and so it is getting a substantial amount of that block chance from the strength, and it's just, healing effectiveness with healing hands is broken, so you slap that on anyways. Once again, the champion regalia with the armor and the dot mitigation with T6 or T7 attunement is going to be bis here. You can craft vitality or any other attribute to try and hit some extra attribute breakpoints for the red rings, and then you can, for suffixes, craft armor and then cold res for the extra retention. Red rings, of course, give you damage reduction. If you have them, you should equip them. These are going to be best in slot for supports. There's really nothing else on rings that you'd possibly possibly want in terms of making your character tanky. So red rings is just going to be best in slot in all cases here. This slam did not go to plan. It is a 50% crit chance ring on the support, but obviously you would want some kind of cold res or healing effectiveness or something like that on the red rings if possible. And then of course on the belt, we're going to be rolling CDR. As I've discussed before, this character is also using volatile reversal and it stacks. So CDR on this character on the belt and boots is going to also be mandatory. Shackles, of course, with the ward retention, it builds attunement, which gives us some extra healing effectiveness. The drain mod is also necessary to enable divine barrier. Julia's path, which is the same function as it is on the paladin. And then last, the relic is just healing effectiveness, cast speed, and LE cold res. If you do get a Code of the Erased Sentinel with some good attributes, some T6, T7 healing effectiveness, this would be better. However, we felt the retention was a little bit low, so we opted for a Argent Crest because it has the 40% cold resistance implicit. So you can pump up your retention a lot if you opt for this, but you're a little bit more susceptible for the dots. Once again, it's just healing effectiveness, block effectiveness, 2x2s here, and then you just get some healing effectiveness and some other items, poison res, fizz res, whatever you need to cap out. Blessings, of course, this build struggles a little bit for resistances because as for the blessings, you can get crit avoidance or resistances here, and then armor as well as cold res for the retention because it already has a ton of armor. You can get armor here, you can get block effectiveness here, you can get cold res. Those are all viable options in this slot. As for the skills here, shield throw, all it's doing is giving us 500 armor for each ally that it hits with the ricochet. If you're unaware, this node down here, Testament of Light, is bugged and does not affect the armor at all. So you just take the base node, which is 500, and give all your teammates 500 times whatever increased armor they have. It's a pretty powerful node, and there's basically nothing else better to put on the bar. Healing hands, it has all the same stuff. Yeah, you basically want to take divine barrier, and then you get more upfront healing, get a bunch of ward retention, and you're going to be immortal. One other thing to know here is that you can get increased damage taken on the mobs here, which is these nodes at the top right, and it is a little bit of a damage buff on stuff like shades, as well as some undead mobs like the Emperor of Corpses. Volatile reversal, spoke about it on the paladin. This skill's broken, and you just take basically the exact same tree. You can take the extra CDR here if you want as well. Javelin, of course, the main node here is battle standard. It's increased damage per attunement, so you build more attunement on this character so you can give your teammates more increased damage while they're standing in the AoE of the flag. And then last but not least is going to be anomaly. There is a ton of utility down here at the bottom right that you can take. It's 20% increase attacking cascade for your teammates that run through the bubble, and the bubble buff actually lingers. It lingers here for 2 seconds on this node down here. It also gives all your allies 30% increased cooldown recovery speed, which is kind of crazy because, as I said before, CDR is one of the best stats for volatile reversal, which is one of your biggest damage steroids in a party. And so this node, when everybody's inside the bubble, is proccing more and more volatile reversals for all of the paladins that are in the party. And this just makes your damage skyrocket, right? If you get 3, maybe 4 volatile reversals off, buffs up, you're getting, 300, 400% more damage taken on the mob. It's just crazy how high the damage numbers can go. And then, of course, the +4 on anomaly here is going to be very important because we do need to path up here to take the time lock duration, right? Because this is the thing that's letting the stuns last so long. And then after you make the time lock last forever, you do need to path down here to grab the cooldown. And that's why you need +4 on anomalies to grab these nodes to make the cooldown shorter. If you have a fairly optimized build with CDR on the belt and boots and maybe some other places, you have the time lock duration up here, you're going to be able to perma-stun stuff like shades forever in place. As for the tree, it's going to look very identical to the paladin here, except for you need a little bit more investment here in the Void Knight tree in order to unlock anomaly. The best nodes down here are just probably the strength, right? There is unfortunately no good nodes, so you do need to waste some points here in order to get to these strength nodes in order to fill out the tree to take anomaly. The rest of the tree, you're just basically taking the same thing as strength. And then, of course, you're getting as much healing effectiveness over here on the paladin tree until you get locked out with the chains here. As for the last build in the party here, Chili is playing the Wrongwarp version of the build. I am not going to go over this build once again. I have heavily covered this build in another video, which is my last Epoch group build update before the patch came out. If you want to learn all about the Wrongwarp version of this build, I would go there. There's nothing fancy going on here. Essentially, it's just deck stacking with Jorah's Ring and intelligence. Yeah, I don't think I need to go over this build again. I have gone over it maybe 3-4 times. I would refer you to my previous video if you would like to learn all about this build. Yeah, guys, I think that is about all for all the builds. Hopefully that answers most of the questions about how to gear it, where we're prioritizing our skill points, that kind of thing. Hopefully it helps your group out. This is probably where our corruption push ends. We might do a little bit more, but we're going to try and do a little little bit of focus here on Arena. If we look at the Arena ladder here on Last Epoch Tools, we have a bunch of bug abusing warlocks here that are abusing a Ghost Flame bug. So, you know, these people are going 1,000, maybe 2,000 waves abusing the Ghost Flame bug. These runs probably ended because they crashed their game or they just had a lapse of judgment at the very start of the arena before they could actually get fully ramped. I might make a video kind of showcasing this bug, but it's an infinitely ramping damage and EHP bug that a lot of these warlocks are probably using. And as you can see, the arena ladder is just plagued with warlocks, and that is because of two bugs. One of them is obviously the Profane Veil giving you way too much ward, and then also there is an infinitely stacking damage bug on Ghost Flame. The 4-player arena here is obviously not very competitive, so we're just going to see how far we go. I don't know if we'll go to 2,000. I don't know if we'll beat the warlocks that are all just abusing the crazy shit, but we'll see how far Healing Hands can take us. Maybe we get above these people. We'll just see how it goes. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for this video. If you guys have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments. I'm happy to answer. As long as it isn't, is Hydrohedron better than Plasma Orb, I will just block you. Yeah, other than that, I'm all ears. Once again, I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.